Well, welcome to the 700 Club. A surprise drive-by yesterday, President Trump waving as his motorcade made its way through supporters sharing their love outside Walter Reed Medical Center. This show of strength appeared to confirm what doctors are saying, that the president is improving. How much do we really know about his condition? George Thomas has the details.
Doctors overseeing the president's care say he continues to improve and could return to the White House as early as today. On Sunday, Mr. Trump briefly left the hospital to wave at supporters gathered outside the facility to wish him well.
God bless our president!
Some critical of the president's move, saying it may have endangered Secret Service members inside the vehicle. A White House spokesperson insisting the trip was cleared by medical staff. The president has been at Walter Reed since Friday, shortly after announcing that he tested positive for the virus. The White House initially said Mr. Trump had only mild symptoms, but it was later revealed that he was moved to the hospital after registering a fever and taking supplemental oxygen. His blood oxygen levels dipped again on Saturday. Pressed about the conflicting information, the president's doctors acknowledging that they wanted to give the public a positive outlook on the president's condition.
I was trying to reflect the upbeat attitude that the team, the president, that his course of illness has had. I didn't want to give any information that might steer the course of illness in another direction, and in doing so, it came off that we were trying to hide something, which wasn't necessarily true.
The president posting this video on Twitter, saying he's been learning a great deal about the disease.
It's been a very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it.
Not clear when the president contracted the virus, but several people who attended last week's Rose Garden event, where he announced Judge Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court, have now tested positive, as well as several members of his debate preparation team. Meanwhile, the Senate has postponed all floor activity until October 19th after 3 GOP senators tested positive. Still, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell saying confirmation hearings for Judge Barrett will still proceed as scheduled on October 12th. The vice presidential debate is still on for this Wednesday with one change. Vice President Mike Pence and his Democratic rival Kamala Harris will now be 12 feet apart instead of 7. George Thomas, CBN News.
Well, CBN medical reporter Laurie Johnson is here to talk about the president's treatment. Laurie, tell us what you know about that treatment they gave him. Is this unusual? Is this extraordinary? What's the story?
Well, Pat, during a videotape tweet on Saturday, the president said these therapeutics that he's getting are miracles. He said, I'm probably going to get criticized for saying that, but they're miracles sent down from God. He's getting 3 drugs that attack different phases of COVID-19, the disease. The first one he received, a polyclonal antibody made by the drug company Regeneron, attaches to the spike protein of the coronavirus and prevents it from penetrating into the cells. The second one, an antiviral medication called remdesivir, prevents the viral cells from replicating. And the third is called dexamethasone, and it's a steroid designed to tamp down the inflammation, particularly inflammation in the lungs, that helps people breathe better. All 3 of these have shown to be beneficial to COVID-19. Remdesivir and dexamethasone have actually been approved for emergency use authorization by the FDA.
Well, Laurie, let's talk about releasing the president today. Does that mean he's recovered, or he's just going to the White House to rest for further treatment?
Absolutely. He's going to be monitored around the clock, and the doctors say he will continue to receive the remdesivir and the dexamethasone treatments. We do know, Pat, that there's particular concern because when people take a turn for the worse, statistics show that they do so between 5 and 10 days following the first onset of symptoms, which we know for the president was on Thursday. So he's going to be monitored very carefully but he was released. Typically, doctors feel safe releasing patients from the hospital if they haven't had a fever or the need for supplemental oxygen for 48 hours, which appears to be the case with President Trump.
Lori, this is a strange virus. It affects every part of the anatomy. It affects the brain, it affects the lungs, it affects the vital organs. What are we learning from his illness?
Well, the takeaway for a lot of us common folks, Pat, is he was also given vitamin D and also zinc supplements. And we know that studies show that these two supplements do benefit people who have COVID-19. So one of the things that we can all learn is that we need to have plenty of vitamin D and zinc in our system. And most Americans are vitamin D deficient. So take a vitamin D supplement. If you're not sure about your own vitamin D levels, you can get a blood test. Go talk to your doctor about that. Another big takeaway, Pat, from President Trump is he had 2 strikes against him, his age and his weight. We know that as each one of these increases, so does the risk for severe complications, including death. Obviously, we can't do anything about our age, but we certainly can do things about our weight. And we know that the more overweight a person is, the greater chance for severe complications, including death, because overweight and obesity cause an increase in inflammation. They decrease our immune function, and they also cause more blood clotting in many people.
One last question. What about shutting the whole economy down? They shut it down once. It seems to have deleterious consequences, but what is the deal? I heard one expert, I think from Johns Hopkins, say it's only in enclosed spaces where you get a load of this virus, but if you're, say, in an outdoor stadium, it's okay. And I've also heard various kinds of masks don't work. So tell us about some of those things, will you?
Well, doctors say that masks do in general work, that outdoor is better than indoor, but even if you're outside and you're close to people and you're not wearing a mask, that can be problematic. Regarding opening up the economy, everyone wants to see the economy functioning properly, and most medical professionals say you can still go back to work and still get the economy going in a safe way, and that is keeping social distance, staying 6 feet apart from people, wearing a mask, and washing your hands. And again, like we were saying, doing things to boost our immune system if we become ill.
What about taking those Pepsis? You aren't too high on them in terms of what they do to the gut flora, but the president's taking one of them now.
That's true, and that's because sometimes that was a precautionary measure in case he might have stomach problems. But in general, you need to talk to your doctor before you want to take a medication like that. As you said, some of the doctors I've spoken to say those can be problematic, particularly long term.
Well, thanks, Lori. Okay. Well, in other news, the Supreme Court begins its new term today, and since the death of Justice Ginsburg, it's a tied court. What impact could that have on upcoming cases or even a contested presidential election? CBN's Paul Strand brings us a look at what's ahead.
The main religious liberty case involves a Philadelphia Catholic foster agency tossed out of placing foster children for the city because it wouldn't, for biblical reasons, agree to hand kids over to same-sex married couples. The question is whether the city has infringed on the agency's religious liberty.
I think many of the justices think that Philadelphia, even if the Constitution didn't compel it, the city ought to have granted a religious exemption in these circumstances.
A huge difference this term is the absence of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This likely means less power for the liberals she led and more for the conservative-leaning justices. And that's why all eyes are on the confirmation process of Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
Her record shows that she'll be a justice, as she said, more in the mode of Justice Scalia than in the mode of Justice Ginsburg. And that's precisely what the Democrats are afraid of.
Obamacare is once more on the line this term. The justices will decide if the individual mandate that forced Americans to get health insurance is unconstitutional. And if they rule it is, whether that then kills the entire Affordable Care Act.
And that's the case Democrats are making their main argument against both President Trump and Amy Coney Barrett. They maintain he wants to kill Obamacare, and she's the justice who would help do it. And a former Barrett colleague says it's ridiculous to assume her vote is already decided before the case is even heard.
It is her conviction. And she has said over and over again, whatever her personal, political, or religious beliefs, her fidelity is to the rule of law first foremost and only.
But until there's a decision on Barrett, the Supreme Court is split 4-4. That could cause real trouble if the presidential election is contested and the court has to basically pick the president, as it did in Bush versus Gore.
I think this will end up in the Supreme Court, and I think it's very important that we have 9 justices.
Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the Supreme Court.
Last time, the play was against the Republicans because they're going to take away protection for pre-existing conditions. Now, the Republicans had no intention of doing any such thing, but that was played, and the president was spending so much time talking about the border wall when actually so many of his Republican colleagues in the House of Representatives went down because of that one thing. And so you're going to hear it over and over again. The Republicans want to take away protection for pre-existing conditions. You'll see ads, you'll see all this stuff. And that isn't true. The Republicans have a very robust plan that was brought forth in the House of Representatives to take care of this. And actually, they had a plan to replace Obamacare. And the Supreme Court, ruled it constitutional on a very flimsy ground. And then they've got whether this individual mandate is separable, whether you can sever that from the rest of the law, or whether that one provision going down will take care of the whole law. That's what they're dealing with. So it's a little arcane, but nevertheless, that's the deal. And so if you have a divided court the way it is now, it's in limbo. But with one more conservative, I think that we'll see the end of Obamacare, which, of course, you remember John McCain. There was one vote. They had all in the Senate, but it was locked in, and it was one vote. And McCain, did this to it, and he voted against it. That was. I remember. You remember? Mm-hmm. And then he said off to himself, now let's see if that SOB can make America great. I mean, he didn't like Trump at all. I mean, it was some personality that it wasn't too pleasant. So in any event, keep your eyes on what's going to happen. But I do think the Senate is ready to confirm Judge Barrett. Just a question of how soon, and we'll see what happens.